Hello, I'm April Davila with Sit Right Here. I'm a novelist and a mindfulness instructor, and I help aspiring authors write more, suffer less. Today, we're going to be looking at it's First Page Fridays. We're going to be looking at somebody's first page. Usually it's a novel or short story. We tend to stick with fiction here, but we're going to read it through and then critique it. We're going to look at what's working, what could be working better, and we all get to learn from the generous act of this author having sent in their first page. So thank you, whoever you are, and let's get into it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you would like to send in your first page, there is a link below in the show notes. You can check that out, send that in, and we could get to yours sometime soon. Okay, let's start at the top. I'm going to just read it through, and then we'll come back and start with our edits. The fifth time my mom called that hour, I had Bitsy's blood on my hands. I hadn't noticed it at first, maybe because the shock of seeing Bitsy on a ventilator had sent a ringing to my ears, or because the fetor of flesh and dried blood had wrung my stomach like a dish rag, dousing my other senses. But as the room came to an eerie silence, as I pulled my hand from the door handle, leaving behind a print fit for a crime scene, I couldn't mistake the ringtone. Mama just killed the man, put a gun against his head, pulled my trigger, now he's dead. Mama. I'm not going to sing it, but I do recognize it as Queen. Danielle snapped her head up from the computer, eyebrows arched in consternation. Her yellow-orange scrubs shone like flames against her dark skin, a stark contrast to the St. Patrick's Day green that speckled the walls of the unit. This is getting ridiculous. Will you just answer her already? She asked. I dodged her eyes, walking toward the sink to wash off the blood before it dried, vowing to choose a career with fewer bodily fluids in my next life. Yeah, about that. I think I should restore our relationship back to its factory settings, only engage on our shared birthday. Danielle pulled the phone out of my back pocket, her pharmacist hands completely unsullied, illuminating the other 4 missed calls from Paula Metcalf, and a text message, which she thrust beneath my nose. It's about your grandmother. Okay, so I recognize this page. This is an author that I have worked with before, so I do bring a bit of knowledge to this one. But I'm going to do my best to just read this objectively because I don't know where the author is with it at this point. So we're going to work with what we have here. And the first thing I always like to just assess is how we're using the first page. Now, you get 250 words on the first page of a novel, and giving those words to anyone else is always going to be a little tricky. Like, just know, it's not that you can't do it. Just know that this is prime real estate. So the ringtone, I wonder if there is a way to either shorten it, like maybe just do like just kill the man. And you could even, and you also, whenever you're using something from pop culture, you kind of have to call it out. Well, no, you don't have to. I will say you will lose a certain percentage of your readers if you don't. I know Queen, I know the song, but like not everyone will. So especially if your audience, you have to know your audience, right? So you might add just like a hint of like Queen's what's the word I'm looking for? The description, Queen's song. We'll come back to it. That's maybe a colon. I couldn't mistake the ringtone. Queen's song. Mama just killed a man. Yeah, so just trying to like minimize the amount of space we give on our first page to something that isn't about our story, right? If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now let's come all the way back up to the top. The 5th time my mom called that hour, I had Bitsy's blood on my hands. I hadn't noticed it at first. Now I'm assuming this is it here is the blood, because that's grammatically what it is. Maybe because of the shock of seeing Bitsy on a ventilator. But see, then I think it shifts. Had sent a ringing to my ears, or because the fetter of flesh had rung. But as the room came to near silence, I pulled my hand from the door, leaving behind. I couldn't mistake the ringtone. Okay, so it's actually, I think that it is supposed to be the ringtone, the calling. So just be aware that like grammatically, it's the blood. So I had Bitsy's blood on my hands. I hadn't noticed it at first. You're talking about not noticing the blood on the hands. I hadn't noticed the calls at first. So, and then this actually brings an interesting question of like, if you hadn't noticed, how do you know it's the 5th time? I mean, we do down here, we get to the point where like 4 missed calls. But we don't know that yet. That's not necessarily a problem. So the fifth time my mom called that hour, I had Bitsy's blood on my hands. I hadn't noticed the previous calls. I hadn't noticed the previous calls. Maybe because the shock of seeing Bitsy on a ventilator had set my ears to ringing. Now, again, sent a ringing to my ears. Now, we're talking about calls, and ringing is kind of reminiscent or evocative of phone calls, so just be aware of that. Maybe because the shock of seeing Bitsy on a ventilator had left me stunned. I think you need to get the word ringing out of there because it's too, it confuses. We're already trying to like clarify what's blood and what's calls. And so just the last thing you want to do on a first page is confuse anybody. Clarity over everything. So I'm going to just put that edit in there. You'll probably want to change it, but maybe because the shock of seeing Bitsy on a ventilator had left me stunned, or because the fetter of flesh and dried blood, excuse me, had wrung my stomach like a dish rag, dousing my other senses. Now these, again, artistic choice, but this is not really a complete sentence. It's done. Missed an end there. You're saying maybe because of this, or maybe because of this, blah, blah, blah. Like we're missing the blah, blah, blah. Like what are those maybes excusing? Maybe you could even say it was, and then you could say that like her not, then the it is referring to the not noticing. I hadn't noticed the previous calls. Maybe it was because the shock of seeing Bitsy's blood had left me stunned, or because the fetter of flesh and dried blood had wrung my stomach like a dish rag, dousing my other senses. That works. It was is not like the most compelling phrasing, but grammatically it's right. It's clear, and that's good. And then we move on. But as the room came to an eerie silence, now it's interesting in this moment because the room is coming to an eerie silence, but we have not seen it be noisy. And so this kind of feels like it's pulling from nothing. So, but now, so I would say now that the room, but now that, well, even that, you could say as I stood, but you could, here's what you could say. But now that Bitsy had been wheeled away and the room was eerily silent. You could say was eerily silent. Again, I'm not wild about that. Like, but now that Bitsy had been wheeled away and the room was eerily silent, I pulled my hand from, I would say, okay, so we have the quiet, and then we have the image of the blood, the print, the handprint, and then we come back to sound again. So I might actually, how do we do this? Okay, but now that Bitsy had been wheeled away and the room was eerily silent, I couldn't mistake the ringtone. I think we need to stay with sound, right? Because we're talking about the ringtone, we're talking about blood. We will get to the blood. So we have Bitsy's blood on our hands. I hadn't noticed the previous calls. And then we hinted why, because this thing was going on with Bitsy. But now that Bitsy had been wheeled away and the room was eerily silent, I couldn't mistake the ringtone. Queen's, God, there's this word I'm trying to think of. It's not epic. Queen, I'll come back to it. I couldn't mistake the ringtone. So here, I might, and then put this down here. Excuse me. I pulled my hand from the door handle, leaving behind a print fit for a crime scene. Now let's see. I actually, because I know this story, I know that this is a medical professional, and I feel like this kind of leads us. So this feels like it's pointing towards a murder mystery, which we do get, but it's not a bloody one. And so I wonder that when I read this, when I pull my hand from the door handle, leaving behind a print fit for a crime scene, You could use that to segue to like noticing Danielle out in the hallway. But I do like this whole bit, and I've had this conversation with the author, so forgive me, dear author, we're going to have it again. She should be wearing gloves. She's a medical professional, and walking toward the sink to wash the blood before it dries. Like I am not a doctor, clearly, and I know you are, so I would defer to what your choices are. But just understand that from someone who's not in the medical professional, like someone who's not in the medical profession, to see a medical professional not wearing gloves and like washing blood off their hands is like, what? Like, shouldn't she be wearing gloves? So in my mind, this is either, I mean, I have to assume it's intentional, right? Because it's on your first page. So the picture you're painting for me is someone who is not a very good medical professional. I don't know if, oh, I do know this, but I was going to say whether she's a nurse or a doctor. I believe she's an intern. She should be wearing gloves. So I wonder if, and like, again, like leaving bloody handprints on the door handle, it just seems like not a hospital that anyone should be at. I'm sorry, but like, I thought my understanding is that like doctors and nurses are very careful about not spreading bodily fluids around. So I feel like this sentence should be changed to like, I pulled off my gloves, threw them in the trash as I walked through the door out into the hallway. Like, I really feel like you need to trim or edit a little bit in here, unless you're trying to, I mean, maybe that's what you're going for. But from what I've read of your story, which is more than this, I don't understand that that's what you're trying to do. So I think I'm going to edit this, and it's your story. You do it. I'm just making suggestions here. I pulled off my gloves and tossed them into the trash. And then as I stepped out into the hallway, the ringtone still sounding from my back pocket, Danielle snapped her head up from her computer. Ringtone. You might even, you could even, I know like you love this ringtone, so like maybe we could get a little bit more of it here. Like, as I stepped out into the hallway, the ringtone was still rang from my back pocket, and then you could do kind of like we did above, put a gun against his head, pulled my trigger, now he's dead. Again, I wouldn't give this much space to song lyrics on the first page, but it's your story, and since you had more of it in there, I think this would be a good way to preserve that and work it in. As I stepped into the hallway, the ringtone still rang from my back pocket. Danielle snapped her head up from her computer. I might put Danielle in the space before you give us the gesture, and that kind of allows us as the reader to see her first in the space before it's just her head snapping up. So Danielle, and also, so she is, where is it here? You said she's a pharmacist. So I'm wondering, like, why is a pharmacist at a computer in the hall? Because, okay, so we know that this is a hospital room. Bitsy has been rushed off, presumably to some sort of emergency something. There was a lot of blood. We don't know exactly what that is yet. But then it doesn't seem it doesn't seem crazy that a pharmacist would be in the area. But why is the pharmacist like at a computer in the area? Again, this is my ignorance as someone who does not know the medical professional. It's an opportunity for you as someone who does know this world to cue us into why. Like, Danielle stood at her computer, or sat at her computer. I don't like the word sat. I mean, I like snapped. Danielle snapped her head up from her computer, eyebrows arched in consternation. Her yellow-orange scrubs shone like flames against her dark skin, a stark contrast to the St. Patrick's Day green that speckled the walls of the unit. This is an interesting word choice. Speckled the walls. Like, does that mean that the walls are like splatter painted with dark green? It's a specific image. I don't know if it's the image that you're going for. So I'm going to leave it there. You might just say the St. Patrick's Day green of the walls of the unit, unless speckled is actually what you mean. But I would encourage you to take a look at that. Also, you might consider going like bringing her dialogue in quicker. We're going to leave her snapping her head up from her computer because I don't know this world well enough to say why else. Like, what would she, it would be great if you could be like, Danielle was typing in a prescription for a patient when her at the main desk, her head snapped up at the sound of my ringtone, eyebrows arched in consternation, right? And then go ahead and give us this line. Put this here. Will you just, this is getting ridiculous. Will you just answer her already? And then you don't even really need the she said. You can say her yellow-orange scrubs shone like flames against. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave this for you to edit, but maybe if you can, it's an opportunity here. Give us a little bit of context of why Danielle the pharmacist is in this space. What is she doing? But I do like that, like, we clearly get the sense that she has heard this ringtone many times, and she's like, oh, okay, fine, just answer it already. Look at the word speckled, make sure that's what you mean. I dodged her eyes, walking, and again, okay, so now she's washing the hands off her, washing the blood off of her hands, vowing to choose a career with fewer bodily fluids in my next life. I like this line. It gives a great sense of the voice of this character, but again, I have issue with like her hands being covered in blood if we're supposed to consider her a professional medical person. So I wonder if there's something else you could have her doing, which then changes all of this, because if she's not washing her hands, then Danielle doesn't necessarily need to, maybe Danielle does, like maybe our main character, which we haven't gotten her name yet. So maybe you could put in like name, this is getting ridiculous. And I knew the name of this character and now I can't remember it. I apologize. I want to say it's Ren. Ren, this is getting ridiculous. Like the earlier you can get that name in there, the better. And then you could have her do something like, she instead of dodging her eyes, she could just, I ignored her and was flipping through Bitsy's chart, trying to figure out like, what is the next thing that she needs to do? Again, ignorant of the medical industry, but my impression is that they are very busy people. So who's the next patient? What's the next chart? Like have her go to that and ignoring Danielle. And so maybe Danielle comes around the counter, pulls the phone out of her pocket and holds it up in front of her face. It's about your grandmother. Like, I think this scene still works. I think you just need to tweak it a little bit so that it's not her washing blood off of her hands, but actually like doing the next thing that she needs to do as a intern or nurse or whatever the role is that she's fulfilling. And then that requires you to tweak this, like her pharmacist's hands unsullied. But I do like the idea that your main character ignores Danielle. She goes to a chart or something of like, I don't need to hear it. And then that Danielle actually comes around and pulls the phone out of her pocket and holds it under her face and says like, it's about your grandmother. And because I do know a little bit about this story, the story is about the grandmother in a lot of ways. So this is actually a great introduction to the character. We get that she is a medical professional, though I do think we need to clean her up a little bit. She has this friend, Danielle, who hopefully will be a continuing player throughout the story. We know that she's avoiding her mom's calls. Kind of. I mean, this actually, it doesn't come off as avoiding mom's calls as strongly as it could, because she just didn't hear the previous calls. So does that count as avoiding mom's calls? She's definitely avoiding this last one. And the fact that she's chosen this Queen song for her mom's ringtone is very telling. So I think just a little bit of clarification, a little bit of bringing the reality of medical procedures into this first page would lend it a little bit more credibility and help bring the reader into the story without them questioning things like, shouldn't she be wearing gloves? You don't want your reader wondering about that. You want them thinking about, like, why is this the ringtone she's chosen for her mom? That is a question that we want the readers thinking about. So in general, great. Also consider ways that, like, we get more of what Danielle looks like than our main character. We know Danielle's name, we don't know our main character's name. Consider ways that you might be able to bring in just even a tiny detail or two about our main character. It's always tricky when you're in first person, but like, could she pull her hair back into a ponytail, and you could, okay, she has long hair, or I don't know, is she wearing one of those, like, scrub thingies that holds the hair? Again, not a medical professional. But just think of ways that you might be able to cue us into who this person is. Is she tall, short, round, skinny? So we get a little bit of the snarky voice, and the fact that she has this ringtone tells us that she is not, she's probably not like a super young person. Though who knows? I don't know. But just think of ways that you might be able to cue us into a little bit more detail about your main character, including name, including description. I hope that's helpful, and thank you so much for sending it. Thank you, thank you. And if this was not your page and you'd like to send in your page, check out the link below in the description. You can send your first page in, and one of these days it could be your page up here. Thank you, everybody. Happy writing.